Your Honor, he scanned in. The courtroom didn't react at first. Then every head turned. A little girl stood in the aisle, braids shaking, gold beads clicking, holding up a thin blue bracelet. The prosecutor stopped smiling. The judge lowered his glasses. And the most feared Korean mafia boss in Seoul didn't move. Because everyone in that room knew one thing. If that bracelet was real, the entire case would collapse. 2 weeks earlier, that same man had been sitting in a quiet bookstore, helping a child find a copy of The Secret Garden. At 8:27 p.m., a politician was shot dead. The city said he ordered it. The phone records placed him near the scene. The prosecutor built his career on it. But what no one expected was that the smallest person in the courtroom who had recorded the truth? And in less than 60 seconds, justice was about to turn. The cameras loved him. Flashes burst like miniature lightning across the courthouse steps as prosecutor Han Sung-woo adjusted his cufflinks and stepped toward the podium. The late afternoon sky hung pale and bright above Seoul, crisp and indifferent. Behind him, the national seal glinted in polished bronze. Today, he began, voice steady, measured, justice moves forward. Applause rippled through the crowd. Reporters leaned in. Microphones lifted like a field of metal flowers. Inside the courthouse, 2 floors above the spectacle, Kang Min-jae sat in silence. Charcoal suit. Hands resting loosely in his lap. Expression unreadable. The courtroom was empty of noise, but not of tension. Officers stood along the walls, careful not to meet his gaze. The air felt tight, as if something had been sealed and everyone was waiting to see whether it would hold. Min-jae did not look defeated. He looked patient. Across the gallery, a small figure lingered long after the press had left. Amara Johnson swung her feet gently above the floor, too short to touch the ground. Her braids were threaded with tiny gold beads that clicked softly when she tilted her head. In her hand, she held a bracelet woven from blue thread and thin silver cord. It was slightly frayed now. She pressed her thumb against the clasp, where a tiny metal square caught the light. Her mother stood beside her, tense. "We should go," her mother whispered. "This isn't our business." Amara didn't move. "That's him," she said quietly. Her mother stiffened. "Don't point." "I'm not pointing." Min-jae felt it, the stare. He shifted his gaze, slow and deliberate, scanning the nearly empty gallery. Their eyes met. For a brief second, the courtroom didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a bookstore. Warm light. Stacks of paperbacks. The quiet scratch of scissors and craft thread. "You said I tied it too tight," Amara had laughed that night. Min-jae had extended his wrist anyway. "Better too tight," he had said softly. "Loose things fall off." Outside, Han Sung-woo concluded his speech. "We have dismantled a criminal empire," he declared, voice rising. "No one is above the law." The applause swelled again. Upstairs, Min-jae's attorney approached him, a file tucked under one arm. "They're pushing for maximum sentencing," she said under her breath. "Public pressure is extreme." Min-jae didn't look at her. "What time?" he asked calmly. She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The murder." Official timeline. 8:27 p.m. His gaze flickered, not to the judge, not to the officers. To the bracelet. 2 weeks earlier, that bracelet didn't belong in a courtroom. It belonged in a bookstore. The rain had started just after sunset. Not heavy. Just enough to make the streets glow. Maple and Lantern Bookstore sat tucked between a bakery and a tailor shop, its front windows warm with amber light. Inside, paper lanterns hung from the ceiling beams, casting soft shadows across crowded wooden shelves. Amara had been sitting cross-legged on the floor near the classics section, frowning at a copy of The Secret Garden with a torn spine. "That one's been loved too much," a quiet voice had said behind her. She looked up. The man standing there didn't look like anyone who belonged in small bookstores. Tall. Tailored charcoal coat. Collar slightly raised. Dark eyes that observed more than they revealed. He crouched, not awkwardly, not impatiently, but carefully, as if lowering himself into her world required precision. "You're holding the wrong edition," he said gently. "The illustrated version is better." She squinted at him. "How do you know?" "I've read it more than once." He stood and walked to a higher shelf, retrieving a pristine hardcover copy. He didn't hesitate. Didn't need to search long. Amara accepted it cautiously. "You don't look like someone who reads," she said. "Appearances mislead," he replied. At the counter, her mother watched the exchange with quiet tension. The craft workshop began at 8. Children and parents gathered at folding tables near the back. Blue thread. Silver clasps. Everyone who entered tapped in at the counter. The system logged the time automatically. 8:12 p.m. The man scanned without protest. He didn't leave when the others did. He stayed. Watched Amara struggle with her knot. "Too tight," he murmured. She tied it tighter anyway. "Better too tight," she said proudly. He extended his wrist. "Loose things fall off." He let her fasten it. And when he finally stepped back into the rain, the system logged his exit. 9:03 p.m. The folding tables were too small for the seriousness on Amara's face. Blue thread stretched across the wood. Silver clasps rolled toward the edge. Min-jae watched without speaking. Children tied knots carelessly. Parents corrected them. Laughter rose and fell like gentle waves. Amara was not laughing. She leaned close to her work, tongue pressed slightly against her lip, fingers working with stubborn determination. "It has to hold," she muttered. "It will," her mother reassured her from across the table. Min-jae tilted his head. "Who is it for?" She didn't look up. "Someone important." A faint smile touched his mouth. Across the room, late arrivals tapped in at the counter. The tablet chirped once each time, quiet, automatic, permanent. Min-jae's phone vibrated once in his coat pocket. He didn't check it. Tonight, he had left the empire outside. Amara finally tied the final knot and lifted the bracelet in triumph. It was slightly uneven, the blue thread overlapping in places where she had tightened too hard. "See," she said. "It won't fall off." She reached for his wrist before doubt could stop her. He hesitated, just a fraction. Then extended his arm. Her fingers brushed his skin as she fastened the clasp. The clasp clicked softly into place. She beamed. "There," she declared. Min-jae studied it as though it were made of gold instead of thread. Across the city, at 8:27 p.m., a gunshot shattered the night. Inside Maple and Lantern, the lantern lights glowed warmly. And the system recorded everything. The news broke at 9:11 p.m. Phones vibrated first. Then televisions flickered alive in shop windows along the street. Breaking news: Reform Party Assemblyman Park Ji-hoon assassinated. The red banner pulsed across every screen in Seoul. Inside Maple and Lantern, the craft workshop was ending. Parents collected coats. Children hugged their finished bracelets to their chests. Amara was still at the table, admiring her handiwork. Min-jae stood near the window now, watching the rain streak down the glass. His phone vibrated again. This time, he checked it. One message. Emergency. Turn on the news. The broadcast cut to chaotic footage, police tape whipping in the wind, flashing lights reflecting off black sedans, reporters shouting over one another. Assemblyman Park was shot at approximately 8:27 p.m. outside a private dinner in Gangnam. Authorities are investigating possible organized crime connections. The bookstore grew quieter. Customers glanced at Min-jae without knowing why. He did not react. His expression remained calm, almost bored. But his mind moved quickly. 8:27 p.m. He had been seated at a folding table with blue thread tangled between his fingers. The bracelet on his wrist felt suddenly heavier. Across the city, the narrative began forming in real time. Political reformer. Public enemy. Crime syndicate. By midnight, a name would be whispered. By morning, it would be printed. Min-jae slipped his phone back into his coat. Amara tugged lightly on his sleeve. "You're still wearing it," she said proudly. He looked down at the bracelet. "Yes," he replied. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The Empire had just been invited into the spotlight. And someone had turned it deliberately. They came at dawn. Not quietly. Black SUVs sealed the street before sunrise. Tactical units moved in coordinated lines, boots striking pavement in synchronized force. News vans arrived within minutes, as if pre-informed. This was not an arrest. It was a performance. Inside his high-rise penthouse, Kang Min-jae was already awake. He stood by the window, the city skyline pale under early light, hands loosely clasped behind his back. The bracelet remained on his wrist, blue thread stark against tailored steel-gray cuffs. His phone buzzed repeatedly. He ignored it. The doors below shattered open. Federal Prosecutor's Office. Kang Min-jae, you are under arrest for conspiracy and the assassination of Assemblyman Park Ji-hoon. Cameras flooded the lobby. Min-jae walked to the elevator himself. No resistance. No panic. When the doors opened to the chaos of flashing lights and drawn weapons, he stepped forward calmly. The lead officer hesitated before cuffing him. Min-jae extended his wrists. Metal clicked against skin. The bracelet shifted but did not fall. Outside, Prosecutor Han Sung-woo stood at a safe distance, coat buttoned, expression controlled. He did not smile, not yet. This marks the dismantling of a criminal structure that has evaded justice for too long, he told reporters. Behind him, Min-jae was guided into the SUV. Across the city, subordinate captains were detained. Offices raided. Accounts frozen. Warehouses sealed. The headlines formed quickly. Empire falls. But inside the vehicle, as it pulled away from the flashing lights, Min-jae's gaze remained steady. This was not dismantling. It was exposure. And someone inside his own house had opened the door. The courtroom was no longer curious. It was hostile. Every seat was filled. Cameras lined the back wall. The public wanted spectacle, and Prosecutor Han Sung-woo delivered it with surgical confidence. Exhibits were displayed on towering screens. Financial transfers. Wiretaps. Surveillance stills. A timeline constructed with clean precision. 8:27 p.m., Han said clearly, pacing before the jury. The defendant's vehicle is recorded leaving his private tower at 7:41 p.m. At 8:22 p.m., cellular tower pings place his phone within a 2-kilometer radius of the murder site. Gasps murmured across the gallery. Min-jae sat motionless beside his attorney. The bracelet remained hidden beneath his sleeve. His defense attorney, Yoon Ji-hae, rose carefully. The prosecution's timeline relies heavily on cellular proximity, she argued. Proximity does not equal presence. Han did not flinch. We also have testimony from a confidential witness inside the organization. Min-jae's gaze shifted, not toward the prosecutor. Toward the back row. A subtle tightening in his jaw. Ji-hae objected repeatedly. She questioned the metadata. She challenged procedural handling of digital evidence. But each motion was overruled. The narrative had momentum. Media headlines rolled in real time. Prosecutor dismantles crime syndicate. During recess, Ji-hae leaned close to Min-jae. They're shaping public opinion before we can destabilize their timeline, she whispered. If we can't break the timestamp sequence, sentencing will be swift. Min-jae's voice was quiet. What time did they say the phone pinged? 8:22 p.m. His eyes lowered briefly. 8:12 p.m., bookstore entry. 9:03 p.m., bookstore exit. He had left his phone in the car that night. The defense did not know that yet. And someone inside his empire clearly did. Silence was never a weakness. But in court, it looked like surrender. The prosecution had finished another sweeping presentation, call logs, financial charts, a supposed insider witness whose voice had been distorted for security reasons. Every piece stacked neatly against Kang Min-jae like bricks in a wall. And he said nothing. Reporters typed the same headline. The Mafia boss shows no emotion. They expected a monster. He gave them silence. Defense attorney Yoon Ji-hai leaned closer. You need to respond to the narrative. At least give me something to work with. Min-jae's eyes remained forward. They are confident. That's not an answer. It is. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Han observed him carefully. Han watched him harder. No outburst. No denial. Just a man studying the room like it was his. Behind him in the gallery, Amara sat with her mother again. She didn't understand phone pings or confidential witnesses. But she understood the tone. The adults were speaking about him like he was a monster. And she remembered the way he had knelt down to her level. Min-jae shifted slightly in his seat, the bracelet brushing against his wrist bone beneath his sleeve. He had not mentioned the bookstore. Not to his lawyer. Not to his captains. He'd learned the hard way that information leaks, sometimes through lawyers, sometimes through fear. And he would not put a child on a target list just to win a case faster. Across the room, Han adjusted his tie. The sentencing phase was approaching. And he mistook silence for defeat. The prosecution closed its arguments that afternoon. Sentencing was scheduled for the next morning. The courthouse steps were a forest of microphones. Historic conviction expected. Career-defining moment for Prosecutor Han. The headlines had already decided the outcome. Inside courtroom 3, the air felt heavier than before, less electric, more final. Spectators filled every seat. Reporters typed before anything had even happened. Kang Min-jae entered in restraints. No visible tension. No visible anger. He took his seat as though attending a negotiation. Defense attorney Yoon Ji-hai's jaw was tight. She had filed motions late into the night. None had stuck. The timeline still held. The confidential witness remained protected. The judge adjusted his papers. This court will now proceed to sentencing in the matter of the state versus Kang Min-jae. A murmur rippled. Prosecutor Han rose smoothly. Your Honor, this case represents more than one murder. It represents systemic corruption, intimidation, and the erosion of public trust. The defendant's influence has poisoned this city for years. His words were measured, almost sorrowful. As such, the prosecution recommends the maximum sentence permitted under law. Cameras clicked like distant insects. Min-jae did not look at Han. He looked straight ahead. Behind him, in the gallery, Amara's feet did not swing today. She sat rigid, bracelet clenched in her small fist. Her mother had tried to keep her home. But Amara had insisted. He was there, she whispered to herself. At the bench, the judge inhaled slowly. Mr. Kang, before sentencing is pronounced, do you wish to make a statement? The courtroom leaned forward. For the first time, Min-jae stood. The metal cuffs glinted. He scanned the room, not the press, not the prosecutor. The back row. Where a small girl met his eyes. His voice was low. No statement. The judge lifted the sentencing document. One signature. And a king would disappear. And in the back row, a little girl tightened her grip on a bracelet no one else was looking at.